Hey there, you're looking kind of cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out all my other socials. Enjoy.
Sun filtered through the tall windows of Westbrook High School's library, casting long shadows across the rows of bookshelves. Jasper Franklin hunched over a desk in the far corner, his heart pounding as he carefully unzipped his backpack. With trembling hands, he pulled out a carefully folded bundle of fabric, glancing furtively around to ensure no one was watching. The dress was beautiful, a knee-length floral print in soft pastels that Jasper had admired for weeks in the window of a local boutique. He'd finally worked up the courage to buy it, saving his allowance for months. Now, hidden away in the quiet sanctuary of the library, he dared to unfold it and run his fingers over the silky material. For a brief, exhilarating moment, Jasper allowed himself to imagine wearing the dress. He pictured how the fabric would swish around his legs, how the fitted bodice might accentuate curves he didn't have. A small smile played at the corners of his mouth as he daydreamed. The sharp clang of the bell jolted Jasper back to reality. Panic seized him as he realized class was starting in mere minutes. He hastily shoved his belongings into his backpack, his mind racing. In his haste, the dress slipped from his grasp, falling to the floor beneath the desk. Jasper didn't notice. He slung his backpack over his shoulder and hurried out of the library, unaware that he'd left behind the tangible evidence of his deepest secret. Hours later, as the final bell rang and students streamed out of the building, Ms. Eliza Chen made her way to the library. The literature teacher often stayed late, using the quiet space to grade papers and plan lessons. As she settled at her usual table, movement caught her eye. Frowning, Ms. Chen stood and walked to the far corner where she had spotted the flash of color. Her eyes widened as she bent to retrieve a crumpled dress from beneath the desk. She held it up, smoothing out the wrinkles. It was lovely, she thought, and completely out of place in a high school library. Ms. Chen's brow furrowed as she considered the situation. She had a strong suspicion she knew who the dress belonged to, and her heart ached at the thought of the fear and shame they must be feeling. Making a quick decision, she carefully folded the dress and tucked it into her bag. The next morning, Jasper arrived at school in a cold sweat. He'd torn apart his room searching for the missing dress, growing increasingly frantic as the horrible truth sank in. He must have left it in the library. His stomach churned at the thought of someone finding it, of his carefully guarded secret being exposed. As he slunk into Ms. Chen's classroom for first period literature, Jasper kept his eyes downcast. He barely heard a word of the lecture on Shakespeare's sonnets, his mind consumed with worry. When the bell rang, he gathered his things and prepared to flee. "Jasper, could you stay behind for a moment?" Ms. Chen's gentle voice froze him in place. Jasper's palms grew clammy as he approached her desk, certain this was it. She'd found the dress and was about to confront him. But when he finally met her eyes, he saw only warmth and understanding. Ms. Chen reached into her desk drawer and withdrew a familiar bundle of fabric. "I believe this belongs to you," she said softly, holding out the dress. "I found it in the library yesterday afternoon." Jasper stared at the dress, his face burning with shame and fear. He opened his mouth to stammer out an excuse, but Ms. Chen continued speaking. "Jasper, I want you to know that you're safe here. You don't owe me or anyone else an explanation. I just wanted to return this to you discreetly, and to let you know that if you ever need someone to talk to, my door is always open." Tears welled in Jasper's eyes as he accepted the dress with trembling hands. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice cracking. Ms. Chen smiled gently. "You're welcome. Now you'd better hurry to your next class. But remember what I said. Anytime you need support, I'm here." Jasper nodded, clutching the dress to his chest as he hurried out of the classroom. For the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of hope. Someone knew his secret, and they hadn't reacted with disgust or anger. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as alone as he'd thought. Over the next few weeks, Jasper found himself gravitating towards Ms. Chen's classroom during lunch and free periods. At first, their conversations were stilted and awkward, with Jasper afraid to reveal too much. But gradually, he began to open up. One rainy afternoon, as they sat sharing sandwiches Ms. Chen had brought, Jasper finally found the courage to speak his truth aloud. I don't think I'm supposed to be a boy," he said softly, staring down at his hands. "I've always felt different, like I was living in the wrong skin. When I wear that dress, it's the only time I feel like myself." Ms. Chen reached out and gently squeezed Jasper's hand. "Thank you for trusting me with this," she said. "Have you ever heard the term transgender?" Jasper shook his head, and Ms. Chen spent the next hour explaining gender identity, transition, and the challenges and joys of living authentically. By the time the final bell rang, Jasper's head was spinning with new information and possibilities. I think I might want to try using different pronouns," Jasper admitted as they packed up their things. "And maybe a different name?" Ms. Chen smiled encouragingly. "That's a big step, but I'm here to support you. Do you have any names in mind?" Jasper hesitated, then said shyly, "I've always liked the name Yasmin." "Yasmin," Ms. Chen repeated. "It's beautiful. Would you like me to use that name and she, her pronouns when we're alone together? It might be a good way to see how it feels." Jasper, now Yasmin, nodded, a smile spreading across her face. "I'd like that very much." The next few months were a whirlwind of change for Yasmin. With Ms. Chen's support, she began to explore her identity in small, careful steps. She grew out her hair, experimenting with different styles. She painted her nails clear at first, then progressed to pale pinks and purples. Each tiny act of self-expression felt like a revelation. Ms. Chen helped Yasmin research local support groups and therapists specializing in gender identity. Together, they practiced conversations Yasmin might have with her parents, role-playing different scenarios to help her feel prepared. When Yasmin finally gathered the courage to come out to her family, the results were mixed. Her mother was confused, but tried her best to be supportive. Her father struggled more, retreating into stony silence. But with time and family therapy sessions, they began to understand and accept their daughter. As senior year approached, Yasmin made the decision to transition socially at school. She spent the summer working with the school administration to ensure a smooth process. When she returned in the fall, it was as Yasmin Franklin, wearing a floral dress much like the one that had started her journey. There were challenges, of course. Some students whispered and stared. A few made cruel comments. But Yasmin found strength in the support of Ms. Chen, her family, and the friends who stood by her side. She held her head high, finally feeling comfortable in her own skin. On a crisp autumn day, Yasmin stood before her bathroom mirror, applying mascara with a steady hand. She'd come so far from the scared, closeted person she'd been just a year ago. As she stepped back to survey her reflection, taking in the fitted sweater that accentuated her developing curves, the swing of her shoulder-length hair, she smiled at the young woman looking back at her. The doorbell rang, and Yasmin hurried downstairs. Her best friend Fleur was waiting to drive them to school. As they pulled out of the driveway, Fleur glanced over with a grin. "Ready for your big day, Ms. Student Council President?" Yasmin took a deep breath, smoothing her skirt. "As ready as I'll ever be," she said. The school auditorium was packed for the first assembly of the year. Yasmin stood backstage, going over her speech one last time. She caught sight of Ms. Chen in the wings, who gave her an encouraging thumbs up. As the principal introduced her, Yasmin squared her shoulders and walked out onto the stage. The spotlight was blinding, but she found her voice. "Good morning, Westbrook High," she began, her voice clear and confident. "For those who don't know me, I'm Yasmin Franklin, your student council president for this year. A lot of you knew me by a different name not too long ago. My journey to discovering my true self hasn't been easy, but it's taught me so much about courage, authenticity, and the power of a supportive community." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. Some were curious, some confused, but many were nodding along, offering encouraging smiles. This year, I want to focus on making Westbrook a place where everyone feels safe to be themselves, where we celebrate our differences and lift each other up. I know from personal experience how life-changing it can be to have just one person in your corner. Imagine what we could accomplish if we all committed to being that person for each other. As Yasmin continued her speech, outlining her plans for the year ahead, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. She was exactly where she was meant to be, finally living as her authentic self. The road ahead might not be easy, but she was ready to face whatever challenges came her way. After the assembly, Yasmin found herself surrounded by classmates offering congratulations and support. As the crowd thinned, she spotted Ms. Chen waiting nearby. "That was quite a speech," Ms. Chen said, beaming with pride. "How do you feel?" Yasmin considered the question. "Scared," she admitted, "but excited, hopeful, like I'm finally on the right path." Ms. Chen nodded. "That's how growth feels. I'm so proud of you, Yasmin. You've come so far." "I couldn't have done it without you," Yasmin said, impulsively hugging her teacher. "Thank you for being the first person to see me, the real me." As they parted, Ms. Chen squeezed Yasmin's shoulder. "You did all the hard work. I just provided a safe space for you to figure things out. Now, go on. I think you have some presidential duties to attend to." Yasmin laughed, straightening her posture. "You're right. Time to go make Westbrook High a better place for everyone." As she walked down the hallway, head held high, Yasmin marveled at how much had changed in just 1 year. From a scared teenager hiding in the library to the confident young woman she was becoming, it was a transformation she never could have imagined. The journey ahead would have its challenges, but Yasmin was ready to face them. She had a support system, a voice, and most importantly, she had herself, her true self, no longer hidden away. With every step, she was walking towards a future full of possibility and authenticity. The rest of Yasmin's senior year flew by in a whirlwind of activity. As student council president, she threw herself into making positive changes at Westbrook High. She organized diversity and inclusion workshops, started a peer support group for students struggling with their identities, and worked tirelessly to create a more welcoming environment for everyone. There were difficult days, of course. Sometimes Yasmin would overhear a cruel comment or catch someone staring a bit too long. But for every negative experience, there were dozens of positive ones. She found unexpected allies in the football team, captain who shut down locker room talk, in the shy freshmen who thanked her for making them feel seen, in the teachers who went out of their way to use her correct name and pronouns. As graduation approached, Yasmin found herself reflecting on her high school journey. She thought about the scared boy who had hidden a dress in his backpack, terrified of being discovered. She thought about the moment Ms. Chen had handed that dress back to her, offering understanding and support when she needed it most. She thought about her first day, presenting as Yasmin, the mixture of terror and exhilaration she'd felt walking through those school doors. The night before graduation, Yasmin sat cross-legged on her bed, putting the finishing touches on her valedictorian speech. A soft knock on the door interrupted her concentration. "Come in," she called, looking up to see her father hesitantly entering the room. Their relationship had been strained since Yasmin came out, but they'd been working on it. Her father cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable but determined. I wanted to give you something," he said, holding out a small wrapped package. For graduation. Yasmin accepted the gift, curiosity overriding her apprehension. As she tore away the paper, she gasped. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a pendant shaped like a butterfly emerging from a chrysalis. "Your mom helped me pick it out," her father explained, his voice gruff with emotion. "I thought... well, it seemed fitting. You've gone through your own metamorphosis, and..." He trailed off, looking uncomfortable. Tears welled in Yasmin's eyes as she fastened the necklace around her neck. "It's beautiful, Dad. Thank you." Her father nodded, then surprised her by pulling her into a tight hug. "I'm proud of you, kiddo," he murmured. I know I haven't always shown it, but I am. You're braver than I ever was at your age." Yasmin clung to her father, the simple acceptance meaning more than she could express. When they finally pulled apart, both of their eyes were damp. "Get some sleep," her father said gruffly, patting her shoulder. "Big day tomorrow." As the door closed behind him, Yasmin touched the butterfly pendant, a smile playing on her lips. She turned back to her speech with renewed energy, knowing exactly how to finish it. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Yasmin stood before the mirror, adjusting her graduation gown. The butterfly necklace glinted at her throat, a reminder of how far she'd come. With a deep breath, she headed downstairs, where her parents were waiting to drive her to the ceremony. The school gymnasium was packed with proud families and nervous graduates. Yasmin sat on the stage with the other honor students, her heart racing as she waited for her name to be called. Finally, the principal stepped up to the podium. "And now it is my great pleasure to introduce our class valedictorian. This young woman has shown incredible courage, determination, and leadership throughout her time at Westbrook High. Please welcome Yasmin Franklin." A wave of applause washed over Yasmin as she approached the podium. She caught sight of Miss
Chen in the audience, beaming with pride, and felt a surge of confidence. Taking a deep breath, she began to speak. "Fellow graduates, honored guests, family, and friends. We stand here today on the cusp of a new chapter in our lives. As I look out at all of you, I'm reminded of a quote by the author Anais Nin. And the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom." Yasmin paused, her hand unconsciously reaching up to touch her necklace. "I know a little something about taking risks to blossom. Many of you knew me by a different name not too long ago. My journey to stand before you as my authentic self hasn't been easy, but it's taught me invaluable lessons about courage, self-acceptance, and the power of community." She went on to speak about the challenges they'd all faced during their high school years, the growth they'd experienced, and the bright futures that lay ahead. As she neared the end of her speech, Yasmin's voice grew passionate. "As we leave Westbrook High and step into the next phase of our lives, I challenge each of you to take risks, to have the courage to be yourselves unapologetically, to stand up for what you believe in, even when it's difficult, to be the person who offers understanding and support to someone who's struggling." Yasmin's eyes found Ms. Chen in the crowd, and she smiled. "Sometimes all it takes is one person believing in you to change the course of your life. Be that person for someone else. And remember, it's never too late to become who you've always been meant to be." As Yasmin concluded her speech, the gymnasium erupted in applause. She made her way back to her seat, her heart full. The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur of names called, tassels turned, and caps tossed into the air. Afterwards, as families and friends mingled on the school lawn, Yasmin found herself pulled into countless hugs and conversations. Her parents beamed with pride, her father's arm draped protectively over her shoulders as they posed for photos. As the crowd began to thin, Yasmin spotted a familiar face. She excused herself and made her way over to where Ms. Chen stood. "Congratulations, Yasmin," Ms. Chen said warmly, pulling her into a hug. "That was a beautiful speech. You've come so far." Yasmin felt tears prick at her eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you, Bases," she said. You changed my life that day in the library. I don't know where I'd be if you hadn't shown me kindness and acceptance when I needed it most." Ms. Chen smiled, her own eyes suspiciously bright. "You did all the hard work, Yasmin. I just provided a safe space for you to become who you've always been. I'm so proud of the young woman you've become." Yasmin's graduation day had been perfect. The speech, the applause, the warm embrace of her parents and friends, it was all better than she could have hoped for. As she lay in bed that night, her mind kept drifting back to Ms. Chen's words. She had come so far, but there was still a long journey ahead. The next morning, Yasmin woke up feeling energized. She had plans to meet Fleur for a day of shopping and celebration.
After a quick breakfast, she grabbed her purse and headed out to meet her friend. "So, what's on the agenda today?" Fleur asked as they drove towards the mall.
Thanks for watching. The rest won't be viewable on YouTube, so check out Patreon if you want more. I hope you have a wonderful day, my cutie.